Hi everyone, this is Raymond Wood from the Raymond Wood podcast. Now you probably hear me say this every week. I'm always excited by the next guest and it's always the biggest guest. I've had some of the biggest famous football players and ex-coaches on over the past couple of months, but this one, after reading the book and listening to the audio book as well, I'm really excited. And I've got a legend of the water and the season, Bonnie Hancock. How are you, Bonnie?
Oh, that's a lovely introduction. Thank you. I'm really, really well. Thank you. Joining you from the beautiful Gold Coast. So it's good to be on dry land, not in the ocean today. A bit of a change of scenery.
It's amazing. Now, actually, I feel very flattered speaking to you, actually listening to your book and seeing what you actually done. And just for our listeners, and just to fill you in a little bit, Bonnie, with our background. So we work in professional football or soccer, as you know it, down in where we are in the Gold Coast in Brisbane. We work a lot with male and female players. And one of our big pushes over the past 18 months is really, especially being a dad of two daughters, I'm very pro females and getting involved in sports. And we're just going to talk a little bit about your journey and probably a little bit what led you. Firstly, obviously, we know why you've wrote this book, but obviously what first took you to start writing this book. So just for our listeners, if you could give them like maybe a little bit of a quick 2-minute background on where you first started getting involved in sports. And was it mum and dad who were a big influence or was it family or friends?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, well done for all you're doing and the incredible hard work for, creating those opportunities for young girls and women. And as you know, there are a lot of barriers that females can face when it comes to sport. And I'm incredibly passionate in the area of surf life saving, which is, I've been involved in since the age of 5 and mentoring and coaching young girls and helping them through some of those barriers and, giving them that space where they can have that outlet and, get out there in the ocean and enjoy and, kind of create an escape from all of their, sort of issues they can face, on land as well. But for me, the journey began in a tiny little place called Sawtell, population 2,000. It's in the beautiful north coast of New South Wales. So I'd say it was quite a sheltered upbringing. From the age of 5, mum and dad pretty much threw us into the local surf club. I was very much a water baby, but I was third in line. So I'm one of 4 girls. And I just wanted to do everything my older sisters were doing, as we do as a middle sibling. I think it was the age of 10 when I received my, I say, very first foamy board. It was a hand-me-down. It had all sorts of dints in it. But to me, it felt brand new and so special. I don't really remember getting anything too new with siblings, but I took that foamy board out into the ocean. I never looked back. And from the age of 12, I wanted to be a professional iron woman. I used to watch Carla Gilbert, favorite Iron Woman, the Meadowlee series. She was from Surfers Paradise, run around in the Meadowlee series. And I just wanted to be Carla. And that role modeling happens from such a young age. So at the age of 17, I packed my little car up and drove up to the Gold Coast, which is a hub of surf lifesaving. I joined Northcliffe Surf Club, which is our powerhouse club in Australia. And I made the professional series. There's only 20 girls and 20 boys that get in that series. And for the better part of a decade, I was a professional Ironwoman. So 2 to 3 sessions a day. I know the huge workload of a professional athlete. And for us, it's 3 different disciplines: board, ski and swim. And trained under the blazing sun of the Gold Coast in the middle of the day, in the pool in the morning, in the ocean of an afternoon. So that set me up. Later on, at the age of 27, 28, I'd sort of done most of what I wanted to achieve as an Ironwoman. I switched into specialist ski paddling, which is more of a 5-minute power discipline. So, that was my journey in surf life saving. And as you alluded to, mid-2020, I picked up a book about the woman who paddled around Australia and thought that seems like a pretty good idea. And the rest is history.
Yeah, it's amazing. I remember, I think it was just as we were going into COVID, and I discovered the book myself by David Goggins called Can't Hurt Me. And I started running, and before I knew it, I was running 90, 100 kilometers a week. And then I come up with the idea to run across Australia. And it was weird that when I picked up your book and I'm like, the synergies of like people see things and just going with the right intention to want to do it for like other reasons, like
Mm,
helping people, raising money for charity. And I think it was such a really, really good cause because that was the big focus that I took out from the book. You were so focused all
mm,
the time on how much money you could raise. And when you had those days where you had no contact to land
mm,
and you were just focused on wanting to know how many people had been on the socials and donated money,
mm,
and
mm.
it was such a good way to go.
Thank you. I do really believe that, to do something that, and a lot of people have called it crazy, and probably part of it is, to paddle 12,700 kilometers, to be, at sea for most of the 254 days, to be up to 500 kilometers out to sea. When you stand on the beach and look to the horizon, it's 40 kilometers you can see. I was up to 500k out, so that's no land in sight. You're on an 8 kilogram carbon fiber ski. It's terrifying a lot of the time. It's got to be about something bigger than yourself. And that driving motivation for me was raising money for mental fitness. And I learnt during COVID that people were more anxious, people were more depressed, the suicide rates were higher, even in the youth groups. And I wanted to do something in that space. And I learned that all of those things were happening was because people were more isolated. People weren't talking to each other face to face. It was all online. So I thought if I can find a way to get through every day and overcome these challenges, maybe, just maybe, I can give someone out there some inspiration. And I sure as hell can get people talking about mental fitness, donating, and everyone who went to that website donating, they were reading about how they can help themselves and others. And sometimes that's all it took to get in the water each day and get that first stroke in. And yeah, it was about so much bigger than, just the selfish reason of a world record.
Yeah, it's amazing. So the charity that you work closely with, is it called Got You for Life? Did I get that right?
That's right, Gotcha for
Yeah,
Life. And it's
yeah.
basically all about having your village or your Gotcha for Life mates who are there for you through anything. You can tell them anything, they can tell you about their struggles too.
Yeah, if it's okay, what we'll do is as well, guys, everyone who's watching and listening, we'll put it in the show notes at the bottom. So if anyone wants to go on and donate, I'm sure Bonnie and I know myself will be very happy. If you could even just donate $5 or $10, it'd be great.
Thank you so much. That's it. It's a literal a lot. It doesn't matter. It's about jumping on, having a read on their website. And sometimes it only takes little acts. It's learning how to be a better listener. It's learning how to be vulnerable yourself. And for me, vulnerability became a superpower. It took me 2 months to be able to open up properly to my crew. For the first 2 months, I was trying to protect them and not give them
Yeah,
any insight into how, dark and deep my thoughts really were each day. And after 2 months, I thought, I'm raising money for a mental fitness charity and I'm not really letting my crew into how much I'm struggling. This is really ridiculous. And I remember that first conversation in opening up to my crewmate and saying, I don't want to go another day. I don't think I can go another day. And I'll never forget what he said back. He said, I'm really struggling too. He was on that catamaran watching me, watching sharks follow me from day one, later on watching for crocodiles. And I'd never even considered how hard that would be. So this created an amazing dynamic where we could tell each other anything. And we got ourselves through the most dangerous waters in the world by talking.
yeah, yeah. And it's amazing. It doesn't matter what the sport is or what you're doing. Communication's probably the key thing with everything. And if we're not communicating, it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's everything, right? And I think learning to have the hard conversations, the conversations which make us uncomfortable, as you would know with your footballers, there's conversations which would be so easy to duck and dodge and weave, whether that's as a coach, as a friend, as a mentor, in our personal lives as well. But often, if there's ever tension, if there's an issue, sitting down with someone face to face and having a one-on-one chat, that's all that's needed. And I can tell you, in the middle of the ocean, when it's just you and your 5 crew, there's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to go. You can really learn to read people's emotions out there. You can tell their body language. And it's quite a beautiful thing, stripping it back to minimalism where all you've got is the clothes on your back, maybe 2 other changes of clothes. Everyone's wearing the same things every day. There's no makeup. There's no glamour. It's just ugly and gritty and messy. And I tell you that you do learn to have those conversations. And I think you also learn to find humor in the face of adversity. We learn to laugh off the crazy things, the 35 not wins, the great white shark sightings, later on the sightings of crocodiles with torches at night time. You eventually learn to laugh about it, because if you don't, you're going to really go a little bit crazy. So, yeah, the crew was everything.
Now, if it's okay, we're gonna get into a little bit of the book because I pulled out some interesting parts, and it was really funny being a dad of two girls, and we're obsessed with watching movies, and we're obsessed with watching Nemo, and you probably know where I'm going with this one. And I'm in the gym listening to the audiobook, and then you started talking about the superhighway, and I mean I know nothing about the ocean. I'm English. Keep me out the sea. I don't need to be in the seawater. And I heard you talking about this superhighway, and it would come resonated from Nemo in the movie. So it is true. Sometimes things they put in movies is actually true. So can you tell us a little bit about this superhighway?
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite stories that came out of this journey. So, I spent 12 months researching what direction I should paddle around Australia. I spoke to skippers, super yacht captains, the world's leading meteorologist in Sir Roger Badham. He advises the sailors at the Olympics. He does, readings in real life, advising the sailors as the wind's changing, what tack they should take. It's crazy. He's spent his whole life studying, and he said, you've got to go clockwise around Australia. Though the four before me had all gone anti-clockwise, you're going to have to go clockwise, because the East Australian Current, which is the super highway that the turtles jump in Finding Nemo, and Nemo joins the turtles, and they basically fly to Sydney in this amazing sort of, it looks like a tunnel underwater. That is actually a thing. And I use that super highway. It's the warm water that gets pushed from the Great Barrier Reef to Tasmania. It gives you an extra couple of kilometres per hour. So by the time I actually got to Sydney, I had a buffer on the world record by maybe half a week or so. You've got to go about 10 to 20 kilometres out to sea to get in it, but it is a thing. The paddling felt easier. I was faster. So, the beautiful children's movie Nemo, that is a thing. And they did so well with that movie. I think, they sort of embedded little facts throughout that when you watch it again, you kind of pick it up a bit more.
Yeah, it was funny. I was talking to my 15-year-old daughter, and I was telling her a bit about the book. And typical teenager, she's only focused on what she's focused on. And I started talking to my 9-year-old, and then I started touching on the Nemo story, and she was engaged straight away. And it was really really interesting to read. Now, moving on a little bit about the ski, and obviously for those that are watching, we can actually put a little bit of a picture up of the ski, that one of the skis that you were in. But to read that the ski was only 9 kilograms in weight, is that
Yeah.
was that true? Yeah.
It's absolutely true. Nine
Wow.
kilograms. It's carbon fiber. I was paddling next to a 10-ton catamaran. There were days where I couldn't get within 50 to 100 meters of that catamaran, because you're going to come off second best if you have a collision. I did run into the catamaran a few times coming in to get lunch, and carbon fiber is so strong, it didn't break when I would hit this catamaran. It amazed me. And I have a 600-gram paddle. It's a double bladed paddle, basically like a kayak, if anyone's seen kayaking or done it. So super light craft, all in all, 9.5 kilos with that paddle. I am strapped into my ski using gear that a sailor does, because early on I used a leg leash around my ankle, which is what we typically do attached to the ski. That's so if I fall off the ski, I get pulled with the ski, because these 9 kilo skis, they're gone in the middle of the ocean. They'll fly a couple of 100 meters away from you before you even know what's happened. So you've
Yeah.
got to be attached to that ski. They're very, very tippy, so they're easy to fall off. But that leg leash wasn't enough to hold in the wind gusts. We learnt that early on. I had some really close misses where the ski went flying and we couldn't catch it. And eventually we did. So I had a safety line, carabiner clips, and I was clipped onto that ski. And I was probably falling out 3 to 5 times a day. It was funny at the start. And by the end, I think my crew got very frustrated having to turn around and come back every time. But that's the reality is there were plenty of parts that weren't glamorous. And at the end of your day, when you're in water that's 9 degrees Celsius, it's 3 degrees in the air temperature, and you're falling out of your ski, it's awful, and it's a violent shock. And down south, hypothermia was a real risk, and I had a few near misses with that too. So they're very tippy, very very small skis.
It just when I think when you put that into perspective, and obviously because I've read the book and listened to the book, and you think you're coming up against some of these sharks and crocodiles, and you think there's only 9 kilograms between you and them, and I'm like, no, I want a
Yeah.
submarine. I want something with a bit of thickness.
Totally. We packed a 30-kilogram plastic ski, and I thought, perfect, I'm all over this. I'll pack this. The reality was that if I was getting into the water with crocodiles, what was going to be the better chance I had on a 30-kilo ski or a 9 kilo? It's a 30 kilo. I got on this thing and felt like a sitting duck. I'm paddling and getting frustrated. And I thought, I've got to stay on the fast ski. I've got to keep moving. I've got to keep
Yeah,
my speed up because, as we know, crocodiles like an easy target. They will
yeah,
sit and wait for days until they're certain they will get their prey, right? They're prehistoric dinosaurs, essentially. They've been around for tens of thousands of years for a reason. And my crew spotted three near me in the Kimberley. It was terrifying. Thankfully, I didn't see them. They spotted them as close as 10 meters to me. And I did so much night paddling because it was so hot in the day, almost unbearably hot. And also you have currents that work against you at different times. So I'd be paddling in the pitch black dark. And as I said, I had crew, one on each side of the boat with torches, and they would do these spot checks. And it was the scariest part of the day. And you just waiting for them to see something and call you into the boat. So I tell you, music was a bit of a savior. I would pump that music all day in my ears and try and just sort of create a different backdrop to the suffering and the terror, really.
yeah. I can imagine the music would have got you through a little bit. I think back to when I was, and one of the questions I wanted to ask you, we think back before you started your journey in the ski. And I remember coming up with the idea to either run across Australia or to run the same distance in a year. And I started doing little 5K runs, and then I built to 10K, and then I'd done a few half marathons and marathons, and then I'd done some ultra marathons as well. And I remember thinking, like, people must just think I'm crazy. And I think at the time, even my wife at the time, I think she must have thought, like, is he having an affair? Why is he going out for 2, 3 hours every day? Where is he? What's he doing? And it's like, and why is he doing it? And what's the point in doing it? And so, can you tell our listeners a little bit, like, what was going through? Because I bet you had, and I did read a little bit in your book, but you get a lot of people saying to you, oh, only 1% make it. It's impossible. You're never going to do it. You obviously had a
Yeah.
lot of these people.
Absolutely. And, then you have your own self doubt too. And sort of that external criticism then feeds your own self doubt. So, when I read this book about Freya Hofmeister, the German woman who paddled around Australia, it was like a gut feel, like this was something I not only wanted to do, but had to do. It was this weird, I hadn't had it since I was 12 years old,
Yeah,
wanting to be an Iron Woman. But for 6 months, I went back and forth thinking of all the reasons not to do it. I wrote a list of why and why nots, and the why nots was pages long. And I convinced myself that it was too crazy. It was out of my reach. I was no way I could do it. And after 6 months, it was like a premonition I had. I was sitting there one day. I thought, oh, it's a shame, but I've got to leave this paddle. It's never going to happen. And I imagined myself as an 80-year-old woman not having done the paddle. And I immediately felt sick, a sick feeling of regret. And in that moment, all in the one day, the day I decided not to do it, I thought, literally, I remember thinking, stuff that. I would rather get a week into this paddle, 2 weeks, 1 month, whatever it is, and have to pull out. At least I've given it a crack. At least I will know where my limits were. And I think anyone like yourself who's dabbled in that area of ultra endurance, who's pursued a goal, who's set out and put the time into something, you have that feeling that the journey to get there is just as important, and you sort of know that you've done everything you can, that by the time it comes to doing that expedition or race, you're kind of okay with what may happen, in saying that I was willing to scrap and claw my way through every meter, and in my mind I was never going to pull out. But I was also okay that if things happened outside of my control, I'd done everything I could, and I left no stone unturned leading in. I actually had to put 15 kilograms on in body weight to avoid hypothermia, and I lost that weight. And that was almost the first test of vanity. It was so fun eating croissants and donuts, but
I could do that.
getting into right a different mindset to put vanity aside and commit to this challenge. And big paddles like you did with the runs out there in the ocean on your own with the music pumping. Like, you go to a place that's just, it's almost quite spiritual. You've got to take
Yeah.
your mind to a place that you haven't been before, and be willing to put your body on the line. And that suffering becomes your norm. And the more you do, the better you get at it as well. So there were two parts. There was the physical anguish and agony every day, and then there was the isolation, loneliness, and fear that came with it. And at different times, either one was nearly overwhelming.
Would you one day like to be a professional football player? Would you like to be part of our pro player pathway? What is the pro player pathway? It's an opportunity for all Australian football players aged between 10 and 23 who want to join us to become the next professional football player. On the pro player pathway, you get to join me and my team free of charge to an event all around Australia. When you join me, we're going to teach you the secrets of football in Europe. And one day, maybe, you could be gracing the Champions League final. Guys, over the next 12 months, we're going to be coming around all the major cities of Australia. And when we come around all the major cities, we're going to be running our free events everywhere we go. So guys, what have you got to lose? Nothing. It's a free event. It's for boys and girls aged 10 to 23. And I'm going to teach you the secrets of becoming a top European football player. Oh, and one final thing. We're going to be giving away 20 scholarships to join me on this program of a lifetime.
And one of the big ones we're going to touch on now, and I know you experienced it in your book, and it really upsets me because we have naysayers in sports and a lot of people who put people off. And one of the examples I gave on a recent YouTube episode was that if you're a dentist and you're sitting in a dentist chair, you wouldn't jump up and tell a dentist he's doing the filling wrong. And it's the same with like sports people. I found there's a lot of armchair supporters who are very opinionated. And I was very fortunate, Bonnie, that I worked on a project in 2010 for 4 years in the English Premier League, and they spent £1.6 billion on this project. So I've been back in the UK for 4 years. I've come back to Australia. I was working in a place called Rockhampton, and I'm trying to teach and educate all these people that we've actually discovered there's no real secret recipe to making it as an athlete. It's all hard work, it's consistency. So roll on a couple of years later, but I remember we were friends with a lady and a gentleman who run a local swimming pool in Rockhampton, and they had two daughters. And I remember having a conversation with the dad every day because they were commuting from Rockhampton to the Sunshine Coast nearly every weekend for their daughters to do life saving. And I remember at one point the dad was getting that fed up with the naysayers and the people who were saying you're cruel, you're doing a disservice to your children. And I'm thinking, probably putting your children in front of an iPad all the time or in front of a television is doing more harm. And the girl whose mum and dad I was speaking to for 4 years was a girl you probably know, is called Lana Rogers. And I remember having a conversation with Lana's dad saying, persist, trust me, don't listen. And to see Lana Rogers now and what she's done in the world, and I wouldn't think Lana would say my mum and dad were mean to me when I was young. I think they actually look at the opportunity she's being given.
Absolutely. And Lana Rogers is, without doubt, one of the best Iron women, not only in present day, but I believe at all time. She has won the Coolangatta Gold. She's won an Australian Ironwoman title. Those are two extremely different distances. You're talking about marathon, racing, and then you're talking about sprint distance. She's a phenomenal athlete, and I think that one of her greatest strengths is her mental fortitude. And I actually didn't know that story, and thank you for sharing that because that gives me an insight into how Lana is so tough. She is one of the toughest athletes. She is. You do not want to race her. Unfortunately, I do have to race her on the ski. She if it comes down to a last sprint up the beach where everyone is hurting and it's about digging deep, there are very, very, minimal opportunities that she'll be beaten, and everyone knows that. All the girls know it. And to come from such humble beginnings and, the support of her parents and the sacrifices they were willing to make, so many professional athletes actually really come from, humble beginnings, and they weren't ever, given anything really on a silver
Yeah,
platter. They've had to scrap and claw their way to the top. And I
yeah,
think that mindset, it just creates this resilience that is so hard to instill, later on. And you're absolutely right. I'm so grateful for the upbringing I had, to have been, thrown in that water, to have been given that foamy board, to be every day running barefoot on the ocean and finding my happy place from a young age. And you can see the kids in Surf Lifesaving in football. They run out on that pitch, they get out in the surf, they light up. And it's a beautiful thing to see kids light up and in that moment just forget their worries, because there's a lot of, kids these days, there's a lot of distractions,
yeah,
there's a lot of worry. And, it's why I'm so passionate about mentoring, coaching. And I think that's such a beautiful story, and one that I'll certainly share as well with Lana. And I have kids in my squad here who I know parents driving from Brisbane, parents having to sacrifice their own, passions as well. That support from a young age is important, and it builds an amazing athlete if the kid chooses to go on.
yeah. It does, and it was funny. I didn't actually realize it was actually Lana until a couple of years ago, and then I put two and two together, and I could never forget the face of her and her sister. And I know for a fact her mum and dad had nothing. They were struggling running this local swimming pool. They were having a lot of troubles with the council at the time. They had a really old beat up car, and they were commuting from Rocky to the sunny coast pretty much every weekend. And that's the thing that I'm really conscious of with my girls, is just giving them an opportunity and supporting them with whatever they want to do in sport or outside of sport. So when we talk about support, that's the next thing I want to move on to, because obviously you had so many people who
Mm,
supported you along the way. But I think what was the real touching bit was about Matt,
yeah.
towards the end of the book, that you were saying that like he didn't originally sign on when he married you to put up with like 8 months of not being there. And it was so touching to read that at the end.
Thank you. Oh, you're absolutely right. It wasn't part of the wedding vows to have to be there for me. While I went 500k out to sea and into waters known for killer whales, it wasn't part of the wedding vows to be stuck on land and without reception as I headed out to sea. But Matt was on the boat for a month, and after a month, the Western Australian government closed the borders into WA. So we were facing the very real possibility of paddling 3,000 kilometres and having to turn around. And that was absolutely a devastating thought to me, but I had to keep going. We didn't know how long COVID was going to last. It was, I didn't want to put this trip off for a few years. So we set off. The Western Australian government had opened the borders, and as we neared WA, they closed them. So Matt said, I'm going to head to land as you continue this paddle. I'm going to join the support crew on land. They were towing the jet ski, and I'm going to get us this exemption. So he spent 2 weeks, sweating over this paperwork, trying to get his head around it all so that I could cross into Western Australia and continue this journey. There's no reception 100k out to sea. So he's on land just following this little tracking dot of the boat, not knowing what's going on out there, not knowing, he's looking at the forecast, seeing 5 to 6 meter swells, not knowing if we're okay. And I would get to land, and the saddest thing was when I got to land, it was this disconnect between us, because all he really wanted was a hug, and that's all I had to do. But I just didn't know what to say. I really shut down, and I was just having to dig so deep, and it took so much of me that for a lot of the time I felt honestly more like an animal than human. And every time we would reconnect on land, there was just this great divide between us, and he was spending all day, on land, worrying, stressing, trying to get this exemption. And I sort of, drove this wedge between us. But the beautiful moment was towards the end of the paddle, and certainly on that last day, or the night before the last day, he actually had flown in certain crew members who came along the way that we met, the cruising Kiwis who got me through the Kimberley, the gold diggers of the West, the most quintessentially Australian characters you'll ever meet. He flew them in. He organized that so they could be there. And I remember looking at him from the other side of the room and, almost falling in love again, I guess, because I saw this man who had done everything, used every resource, every skill he had, dug so deep himself. And I just, we reconnected. And throughout this trip, my marriage, as I write, like it bent to the point where I thought it would break, but it didn't. We came back so
Yes.
much stronger. And I wanted to include that in there. And I looked at Matt and said, do you mind if I include that? And I so clearly remember he said, not only do you, should you, but you have to, because you're not doing yourself justice, me justice, or the crew if you skim over those parts. So people who've been in long distance relationships or certainly experienced any strain, as we all do, can resonate with that. So I'm so glad I put all that in there.
I think it's a good lesson. I think not just for any young ones who read the book, but for older people, even adults, even at the age of 44, I still realise it, that things aren't easy. Sometimes things are going to get hard, really hard, before they get better. But I think it was a good touching point in the book where you speak about diamonds are forged under pressure. And I think I can liken that to your relationship. I imagine now with Matt, it's like I bet you
Yeah.
your relationship will be way more solid for that experience,
Yeah.
and hopefully people understand that.
Absolutely. And it is my absolute favorite quote. I remember running on a treadmill at the age of 17 when I moved to the Gold Coast, and my coach, Pat O'Keefe, would make us, go to the gym and run these crazy sets on the treadmill, get out, do a circuit in the gym. And there was always this quote painted on the wall: diamonds are forged under pressure, meaning that you will face adversity, the tough times will come. Undoubtedly, they will come. And it's how you actually work your way through that. It's how you lean on your network. It's how you find a way to get through that. When you come out the other side, you are going to be stronger, whether that's a relationship, whether that's as an athlete, whether that's as a young person navigating life. And to see that adversity, almost as an opportunity to grow. Adversity is an opportunity. So to strengthen your resolve, to find your passion, whether it causes you to deviate a little and keep zigzagging. It's sort of about, jumping over the potholes or working your way around them or sometimes through them. And you will come out stronger. So I still hold on to that quote and I share it with the young ones.
Yeah, it's a great quote, and I've heard it before, but it was many, many years ago, but it was slightly on a slightly different slant, but it's one that I'm going to steal from you, and I'm definitely going to use
Absolutely
it.
fine. I'll use the Lana story. You can use the
Yeah.
diamonds.
Hey everyone, we are coming around every major city in Australia over the next 12 months. We have got free objective football testing going on, guys. It's for boys and girls aged 10 all the way through to 18 years of age. The objective testing is quite simple. We'll put you through our 6 tests and I'll give you your results: physical, technical and tactical. And also, we're going to choose 16 winners to join us on an all expenses paid trip to Europe in 2024 and also 2025. Guys, what have you got to lose? Nothing. It's free to sign up. You get free objective testing and you'll get a free feedback, and maybe you'll be joining me at the Santiago Bernabeu in 2024 or 25.
Now, one that I will lead into on the story as well, and we'll talk a little bit about the barrier reef and corals and fear. And it was really interesting. I was a very young, naive English soccer coach, and I got an opportunity to go and live in Hawaii. And I was coaching soccer in Hawaii, and I went down to the beach on day one, and I went into the water, and all these local Hawaiian guys are getting really abusive at me, and I didn't quite understand what they were saying, but they were basically telling me to come out the water. I shouldn't be there. And one of them hit me on the back of the head with his board, and he's like, "You need to get out the water." And I just ignored him. I thought he was being rude. The next thing, there was a big wave that come in, and I got caught in a rip. I got put to the bottom of the water where I wasn't aware there was coral. And I ended up with about 4 pieces of coral in my leg and my foot, and I was in hospital for about 4 days. And then I then read your part of the book with the fears around, like, everyone thinks coral's amazing and it looks beautiful, but if you can explain to our listeners a little bit about that experience, because I was quite scared listening to that part of the book for you.
Absolutely. There were a few different times where I was faced with the opportunity to either paddle outside of the reef or inside. And there was this one day in Coral Bay in Western Australia. And for whatever reason, I don't know, it was this feeling like I'd been surrounded by a crew for so long, and I just wanted a day off. I just wanted a day to myself. And I think we all need that disconnect sometimes, that time just to reflect ourselves. And I said to my crew, I'm fine. Today I will paddle this 80 kilometres on my own. I'm going to go it alone. And they were super hesitant. It was a really dangerous stretch of coast, and there's been surfers that have been killed on this reef. And I thought, that's okay, I'll paddle inside the reef the whole way up the beach. And so I paddled the whole way up the beach, and I got about 3/4 through the paddle, and I noticed all of a sudden I'd gone from the shallow water out deeper and deeper, and I was heading out towards the reef. And I thought, oh my gosh, and I started to veer back and veer back. And I kept paddling, had my music in, and the song started glitching. It was so strange. It was almost ominous. This song started glitching over and over. And I'm trying to fix these headphones as well. And without even realizing, I'd gotten out to the reef. I drifted out to the reef. I looked left. I saw a huge swell, at least, 5 foot, I would say, suck up on this reef. And all of a sudden I've tried to paddle through it, and it's thrown me down. I've lost my headphones, my food, my hydration, the radio I had on, my hat, my sunglasses, everything gone with this one freak wave. And not only gone, but my ski and my paddle are gone as well. So I'm floating on this reef in the middle of nowhere. There's no one coming for 10, 20 kilometers. There's nothing around. There's no reception. So it's completely up to me. Another wave was coming behind it. I had to go under, and I remember skimming over the reef. Thankfully, I didn't get dragged along the reef, but this reef is known for great white sharks. This reef is known for tiger sharks, all your different types that are there. And I had to make the choice whether to swim after my ski or my paddle. I'd made the mistake in the past to swim after my paddle, and I knew I had to go for the ski because that's what would keep me floating and alive. I sprinted. I said I channeled an Olympic swimmer and sprinted after this ski, and it felt like something off of Jaws. At any time as I was swimming over these different sections of reef, I was imagining being taken. And when I got to that ski, I wrapped my arms around it, but only half the challenge was done because I then needed to locate my paddle, which was about 100 meters away. So I've kicked my way with the ski to the paddle, got on the ski, but I had no way to contact my crew and let them know what would happen. There was no one coming for me, and I had to slowly grind my way to that finish. I was incredibly dehydrated. I got to the end. I saw Ben and Matt. I'd lost everything. I was fried, sunburnt, and I just got through that day. So, my ignorance and my wanting to go it alone almost cost me in the biggest way. And I looked at them and said, I never want to do another day without my crew around me. It was incredibly, incredibly scary and stressful, and could have gone very badly wrong.
I remember I think I was on the running machine in the gym and I was listening to that chapter, and I was getting a few funny looks because I was cringing. I was like listening to the story as it was getting played out, and I'm like, that's my worst fear, is getting stuck in water with a shark.
Oh, isn't it? Because I tell you, like, your fate's in their hands. At the
Yeah.
end of the day, these, 1-ton creatures, you got no, like, it's what they want to do, really. It's their territory. And I just used to tell myself that if I'm in that situation, to try and stay calm, and I know the kicking and splashing is often what draws them in as well, but really it was all just making me feel better, because I feel like it's their ocean, it's their environment, and they often say that sharks don't have hands, so it can be curiosity with their teeth. And that thought was really also what helped to drive me every day, because I thought, keep your speed up, Bonnie. Do not let that speed drop. Don't make yourself an easy target.
Now, one of the things talking about giving you drive and motivation every day, and we touched on it before, but we've both got a same passion, and we both love house music. So, how did house music get you through? And is there a favorite tune that you always listen to that you think it always reminds you of doing the 200 and odd days on at sea?
Totally. I've actually got to give Fisher a shout out, because Hard Fizz came on as a sponsor for this paddle. And they gave us a bunch of support leading in, and we did our farewell over at their headquarters here on the Gold Coast, and they'll often pump the Fisher House tracks, and that honestly was the only sort of exposure I'd had to house music prior. Was probably more of that mainstream stuff. But Jamie, my crewmate, is actually a DJ. He makes his own tracks. He's, really, really clued up in that space. So he would make me these playlists of artists I had never heard, have no idea. And I would play this all day, these house music, 220 beats per minute. It would help me keep my rating up, my tempo up. And I would just listen to something and be like, I can see where he's going with this. It would start slow for the warm up and then build fast. And he's an absolute genius. So yeah, it was very much, we had a shared love of house music and rap as well, which my last skipper was not very impressed when we would play Eminem and over and over. But I am, the house music's amazing. I'm also, I won't say no to a bit of Stormzy, and often in the middle of the ocean as well, I would just crank Stormzy up and, have that blasting. So it changes the backdrop to the whole situation. It somehow makes you feel empowered and invincible. And there's a whole bunch of research behind music, for athletes, and, that it can play that pivotal role in really getting yourself up for an event and helping to calm nerves as well at different times. So yeah, it was really cool to have him there. So curating my house music playlist.
Yeah, I was very fortunate growing up in Liverpool in England. We were brought up on like the Beatles and then a little bit of disco, and then obviously house crept in the 90s, and I still listen to house now. My two daughters are like, Dad, you're embarrassing. And I'm like, I'll pull up to school with the windows down, house music's playing.
Perfect. You get it. Because I sometimes get weird looks when people ask me what was playing in my ears, and I've got to be honest, right? And I think it's an unexpected answer when I do say a bit of house and a bit of rap. It's like, okay, pick you for that, but whatever works, huh?
Yeah. Now we're nearly finished, Bonnie, and I really appreciate your time, and all our listeners are going to love listening to this one. But one thing I want to finish on was a little bit, I think it was towards the end of the story, and discovering Isabella and the support boat. And I think what I noticed towards the end of the story, it was like you removed all the fears and you never had any doubt that every day was always just going to work out. And I think if that Isabella situation would have happened at the beginning of the trip, it might have been a different outcome. Can you tell our listeners a little quick 2 minutes on the Isabella story and the background on it?
Absolutely. So we'd gotten, 3/4 around the country. We were in Darwin. We were going to make it. I was physically conditioned to paddle all day, so that wasn't a problem. And we got to Darwin and didn't have a support boat. Not only that, there were no boats heading back the way I was going because there were the strongest southeasterly trade winds for 5 years. So we were stuck without a support boat. We had to string this journey together as we went because it's pretty much physically impossible to find a skipper who'll come with someone for 8 months, really, and it's an exorbitant amount of money. We were on a shoestring budget. We didn't have a whole lot of money to give. We went to every marina. I think my crew and I made 500 phone calls in the space of a week. Eventually, we found a skipper in the middle of Darwin Marina. Someone had approached him and told him about me, and he'd said, no, I'm not going to do that. That's crazy. It's incredibly dangerous to cross the Gulf of Carpentaria, let alone with a little paddler on an 8-kilo ski. I'm not doing it. And he happened to be sitting at a bar, and Matt and Blake, my other crewmate, had gone to this bar, and they were telling the bartender about our plight. And Josh overheard that, and he said, hang on, is this about the crazy paddler who's paddling around Australia, blah, blah, blah? And they said, yes. And he said, all right, tell me a little bit more about it. And by the end of that conversation, he was in. He was not only in, he was in with his partner Tina and in with his 65-foot Ketch, which is a big yacht. It was perfect for what we needed to face these headwinds, which a little catamaran probably wouldn't have been able to push through. So I basically had known Josh for a week before, a bit of paddling down near Gove until we hit the Gulf of Carpentaria. And he got me through one of the most dangerous stretches of water, facing huge headwinds every day. There was stainless steel chains snapping on the boat. Half of the crew was seasick. We got halfway across the Gulf of Carpentaria and he had to call it. It was too dangerous. So I'd gone all the way around. We had to motor to safety. And it took me 10 days to convince him to go back out to the middle of that Gulf to finish it. So I thought the record was done. After everything we'd been through, the WA exemption, Matt and I, the relationship, the sharks, the crocs, we thought it was done. After 10 days, he said, we have a weather window of a couple of days. You're going to get one shot at this. And I worked out that to get across, I'd have to set a new world record in 24 hours. And I wrote a letter to myself that day to remind myself to not only reflect on my achievements, but be proud of what I'd done, because I'd never stopped and allowed myself to feel proud. I was emotional. I talked to my crew. I was sobbing, not thinking I could do it. I knew it all rested on this one day. The next day I got back out and I paddled 213 kilometers in 24 hours and set a new world record. And it's amazing what's born out of necessity, what's born out of amazing crew support. So Josh got me through that. And then we were in Queensland. I knew we were home.
That's amazing. It was probably the most favourite part of my story, because one of the big things that I try and convince our families and players is that it's not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of hurdles along the way as making it as a professional football or soccer player. But you've just got to sometimes have that belief and faith that it's going to happen and you're going to do it and it's going to work out. And
Yeah.
that was, yeah, it was probably the favourite part of the book for me. And yeah, a big congratulations on getting that world record. That was phenomenal.
Thank you. I never set out to break 2 world records. That was certainly, a lovely, I guess, surprise and something that came out of this paddle. And I am so proud of my crew and I. They sat there on that boat the whole time. They let me know how I was going, and and we did it. And we brought that record back to Australia. We brought the circumnavigation record back to Australia. I
So good.
so hope someone breaks our records one day, and I would love to see that. That mark of human performance continue to rise, and just to be a part of it is truly such an honour.
I think when I read your book and I read about the world records, and I put it to when the first 4-minute mile was broken and no one had ever done it. And I don't know if you know the backstory of the 4-minute mile, but once it was broken, within the space of 30 days of it being broken, 14 other people went and broke the record again. So I'm hoping that when people pick up this book, it's going to inspire a lot of females to get in that paddle and to give it a go. And it sounds quite strange. Like, a lot of people would say, well, you surely don't want your world record to be broke. Well, you do, because you know that your book has influenced a lot of people as we go along that journey.
Absolutely. It would be the most rewarding thing to have someone essentially follow in your footsteps in doing that. And I'm all about encouraging the next generation of young women and girls, and seeing them better the performances of the generation I've been so lucky to be a part of. And when I was young, I had female mentors who guided me, and at training, these Iron women would tell me about the fastest route to take out to sea. They would tell me when we were paddling on the river to tuck in, on the sides. The edge of the riverbank was where it was flowing the best. And I used to be a bit confused, like, why are they helping me? I'm racing against them this weekend. And finally now, at the age of 33, I get it. I totally get it. And I hope to continue to mentor. I've got my own mentors still helping me, and to see someone break that record would make me so proud.
Amazing. Now, just for all of our listeners, we're very excited. We've actually got 5 of these books to give away. And also, I couldn't believe it when I went inside the book, but it's actually signed by you, the book. So have you signed every book that's gone to these bookstores?
I've signed a whole bunch of books that have gone out, and you'll see the little star there. I've gotten better at doing the stars. They were a bit demented when I first started doing them, but I wanted to sign them, and it's a nice little touch. So I hope whoever gets them really, really enjoys the read.
So what we're going to do is, for all of our listeners, all you've got to do to be one of the winners is actually like, comment, and share on this podcast. And we're going to basically select 5 winners, and we'll actually get these books expressed out to you. And I'm telling you now, you want to get a copy of it. And if you're not fortunate to win one, Guys, I'm a big fan of audiobooks. The audiobook is phenomenal, and I've actually read it as well. But for me, the audiobook was the best because it's actually read by Bonnie as well. Now, before we go and we finish off, Bonnie, one thing I want to ask you, what's next? What's the next world record you're breaking?
It's a very fair question. So what's next immediately is the documentary, which we'll hopefully have news on that in the next week or so, which we're so excited about. It's been 2 years in the making. And, to me now it's about looking at where I can also push the limits of human performance mentally, physically. For me, I would see Antarctica or the Arctic as the perfect place to do that. And we've got a little globe in our living room I often pull up and have a bit of a look at. So I think the cold, the Gold Coaster, I don't love it, but I cannot think of something more challenging than taking a ski down there. So I'll have to watch this space.
Matt must be at home like this going, what's she planning now?
Honestly, I mentioned it, and just like when I mentioned the paddle around Australia, I didn't get too much of a reply back, so I might have to revisit it with him. He might not be along for support. I hope he is. We'll see.
Well, if you need any support along the way of any of your ventures in the future, please reach out. We love to support anyone who's doing anything like you're doing. And a big thank you, Bonnie, from me and the guys at Euro Football Staff for joining us, and a big thank you for Carol Fox, who actually connected us as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I think it's so beautiful when, different sports, we can share our stories and journeys. We have so much in common, and again, congratulations for all the work you're doing for that next generation of young girls and boys and bringing them through. So such a pleasure. Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Bonnie. Thank you.